Well, hello there.
Hello
I
there.
feel like you just have to open it up like that. Um, dude, I'm actually so glad you can join for this. This is going to be a lot of fun. We'll see how this goes. This may end up being a multi-part just for Luke, but I told you what we're going to be talking about today is the hero's journey, and it's like the more you look at George Lucas and the more you look at Star Wars and the inspiration behind it, this theme keeps coming up with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And I wanted to make a video on it, but I don't know how to be brief very well. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just
Right.
turn this into a live stream series and just really dive deep into this because there's so much really cool content, man.
Yeah,
And
I think that's the
I'm
way to go for sure.
Yeah, and I'm excited. And I see a few people. What's up, Strike, Average, La Dodge, Matt Risman says he can't stay, but have a great stream. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it. But here's what we're gonna do. Whether you are watching this live or you're watching this kind of like afterwards, we're gonna give a rundown of the hero's journey, and then we're going to look at Luke Skywalker in particular, and just really start diving into this very thing that influenced George Lucas and Star Wars, and hopefully develop a greater appreciation for everything Star Wars. There's so much really, really cool philosophy, storytelling, mythology behind all of Star Wars that we love. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it hits it on the base note. This is why Star Wars is so successful and why we love it the way we do is because this kind of storytelling is just ingrained in our DNA over thousands of years.
Yeah, and dude, you like even right off the bat, you hit it on the head with the whole idea of the hero's journey is that it's this story that's been continually told, and it's something that's not going away anytime soon. And I think
Yeah.
that's I mean, not only with timing, but that's something that has made Star Wars so successful and so relatable. And it's not just like fantasy. Like it's an amazing story, but it connects us with something a lot deeper. But
Hmm.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to show up a simplified graph of Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey or the Monomyth. And I might pull this back up from time to time so we can reference this. So this right here, this is basically a shortened version of Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. So while George Lucas was actually writing Star Wars in the early days, he had several different versions he went through, and he wasn't satisfied in the early 70s. And then he read a book by Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And it was in this book where he actually pretty much wrote what we see on screen and what we see in the original trilogy, and is even loosely his treatment for the prequels and his sequels and things like that. But really what Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey was, it was this study of all sorts of cultures and religions and um, like mythological stories. And it was trying to really figure out what keeps showing up in storytelling. And he actually found 17 points. And here it's a little simplified with 12, but there was 3 stages in the hero's journey. And basically what happened is you have this central figure who leaves his ordinary world to a life of this fantastic supernatural encounters. He learns something new about himself, returns with this knowledge to benefit his society. And I mean, right there, we could probably be like, that's like every story that's amazing
Yeah.
that we've ever heard. But what George did is he decided to take characters through the hero's journey, and he actually decided to take trilogies in his movies through the same process. And Joseph Campbell himself was kind of obsessed with the imagery of a circle. And so there's a lot of reoccurring themes, and it's not just linear point A to B. It's a lot of things will happen over and over again. And so you'll see kind of the cyclical nature to everything. But what X-Wing and I are going to do is we're going to just start going through the story of Luke Skywalker with this. And part of what you'll see is that Luke starts in the ordinary world, and there's this threshold that he crosses, and he gets into this special world, and he actually gets plunged into like the depths of the beast, as Joseph Campbell calls it, and he has to overcome and conquer all these things, and he ends up coming back victorious, being able to teach others the same thing that he went through. And what's really cool about this is there are characters that, like we'll talk about in this, there are certain characters that will be symbolic and metaphorical in Luke Skywalker's journey, but then there's also characters that have their own hero's journey at the same time. And so it's like the more I study this, I think, you know, I don't want to be like overly praiseful, you know, for no reason, but I really do think especially for the original trilogy and the prequels, George was just masterful in his storytelling. It's incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I do have to say one thing though. Can you pull up that chart again?
Absolutely.
You have Photoshop, right?
I do.
Shame on you. Why did you not turn that into a Death Star? I kept looking at Ordinary World, Special World, and I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect for a Death Star.
That is. I will do, you know what? I will do it next time, because I shamelessly took someone else's work here. But you know what? That is such a brilliant idea. I will turn this into a Death Star. Oh, that's
well,
so
I'm
good.
excited. Yeah, I'm already looking through it, and I'm just kind of picking apart like, oh, which step is which in my brain, and yeah, it's interesting.
And you know, that's actually a very interesting point, because kind of like what we'll talk about is you can actually kind of make arguments for this in either direction. Like, it's not hard and fast. Like George Lucas, well, he does, but he doesn't have like this is exactly when this happens, and there can't be any debate.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of
mean, number 2, right off the bat, I can already think of 2 different arguing examples for his call to adventure.
Yeah. And that's what's so incredible about, for me personally, you know, hopefully some other people enjoy this, but if not, you and I can just dive deep into some philosophy stuff.
Oh yeah, we can gab.
I know what's so interesting is that, like, man, you can go so many different directions in this, and you could make a case per movie, per trilogy. And I think the beauty is that it's almost like it's in the eye of the beholder. Like whoever's looking at it can see
nobody's right and nobody's wrong.
Yeah.
Except for 7. I feel like 7 hits.
Yeah.
Pretty on the nose for that one.
Yep, for sure. So let's do this. You know, when we're starting looking at this, the first step into the hero's journey is the ordinary world. So Joseph Campbell basically said that this is where, like, the limits of a character's world are firmly established. Like, everything is known. Usually things don't need to be barren, but it's usually represented either metaphorically or physically. So that's what we see with like Tatooine. You know, for me, I'm thinking like you see Luke is in this place where he is a moisture farmer with his uncle, and he has this daily routine, and like nothing ever changes, you know. And I mean, for me, it's really interesting to see that, because like it feels so relatable. You know, he's just in this regular routine, and then what ends up happening is that famous scene, you know, the binary sunset. You know, he feels this call to something greater. And especially with Joseph Campbell, there's always this inner call to go beyond the confines of this ordinary world. It's not, there is the external, but especially in this first phase of storytelling, there's something internal that's like wanting to break out, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I agree. And I think, you know, as much as I love a lot of the deleted scenes for A New Hope, I'm super stoked they took out the stuff with Biggs Darklighter, because really it simplifies Luke down to nothing. It's a barren place with aunt and uncle. There's nothing going on. And he's like, well, I just want to go. I want to go to Tashi Station. Like, give me something. And he's like, no, you're here. You're stuck here.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but it's almost he establishes that there are repercussions if you don't stay in the norm.
Yeah.
Like if you're not on the ridge in the morning, so help me God, you know what I mean? He's like, I want to go to the academy. Well, you can't do it. You know, I need you for another season, and then we can get some droids. Like they reestablish that this is never going to change. You're stuck here forever. You're ordinary, and nothing is ever going to change.
Yeah, and I feel, dude, I feel the same exact way about the deleted scenes. Like they're so good, but I feel like they were deleted for a reason. They were taken off of the cutting room floor because it does start to either slow down the pacing for one, but like you brought up, it does start to change the narrative a little bit because there's something like, I don't know, there's just something
It
when
changes
you're
motive and intention
absolutely.
because
That's
he's
a
got
great way to put
friends
it.
and other influences. Where if you strip all that away and it's just only aunt and uncle,
Yeah.
when it happens and they get roasted, now there's nothing left on the table.
And that's actually a perfect point because like later when we're getting into the story that very thing happens where he's that inner call to something greater and that external basically they collide and he has no
Mm-hmm.
other option. It's like you'll die if you stay back. Like you cannot. And I mean you see it in like Lord of the Rings and other like great stories where it's like you have to leave. Like you cannot
Yeah.
stay here.
I don't want to
Um
step too far in front. Where are we at? We're technically still on plain planet, right? Ordinary
Yeah, we're
planet. Okay.
we're still, yeah, number 1.
Okay.
And here and this will kind of be figuring it out, but we'll try to go step by step, but part of this too is we're going to be pulling a lot from
Yeah.
all over and it's kind of impossible to not do that.
Yeah.
Um yeah. But right after this, when we're thinking about this, I'll keep referencing this until it starts to become a little more complicated. But right after the ordinary world, we get into this call to adventure. And for Luke, this is really when you have R2D2 and C3PO introduced, and there's Leia's secret message. All of a sudden, his life is completely disrupted, and he finds out something far greater than himself, and it's like he has to really like look more into this. And at the same time, he's hearing about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he starts asking his family, his aunt and uncle, about Obi-Wan, and all this like, is it old Ben? All of this, and for the call to adventure, there's I can see what you think, X-Wing, but for me, there's not too much to this other than it's like the groundwork is set. Like there's something big that's about to start happening. Like the seed is planted, so to speak. Like in Star Wars, that's kind of what I see. It's like, okay, things are about to get like really, really exciting. Like,
Right.
what do you think about kind of the
Well, I
call to
think
adventure?
100% because that's the bridging moment between the two stories at large, right? We have the huge galactic civil war, which has just found its way to Tatooine in the form of a droid. This
Mhm.
long concurrent storyline, and then we have little orphan Annie, Luke, if you want, but
Yeah.
who's just been exposed to it, and that's definitely
Mhm.
the moment. That's the call to adventure because he's like, wow, well, that's his connecting point is Obi-Wan. But old
Mhm.
Ben, I don't know about that, and that's his call to adventure. We got to go find him. Well,
Yeah.
not we got to go find him. We got to go find R2. But
Yeah. And that's what's even so great, and kind of a plug for another series I want to do. I just don't know how to do it. I want to go through all the other film influences of George Lucas,
mm,
and like it's like Akira Kurosawa is one of my favorite filmmakers and directors. And there's so much that he pulls not only from Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, but from other filmmakers that have also used the hero's journey. And
I wonder
so
if I've ever seen any movies from any of the directors that George pulled heavily from, because that's one thing I've never gotten into. I was more
yeah.
like the stories like Gilgamesh and the epics of
Mm,
old, Homer and stuff like that. That was kind of more of my background.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, a lot of his earlier influences are obviously like earlier cinema. um but I would say like his greatest is definitely Akira Kurosawa, old black and white. There's a lot of samurai films, but then also just some other just Japanese folklore that's
Yeah,
mixed in there. But that's something we should do. We should watch them together and
I'm down.
talk about it, or at least
Yeah.
maybe it's hard to watch stuff together, but just watch it and discuss it, But with the call to adventure, basically what ends up happening right here, you kind of get this intermix of 3 and 4 of refusal of the call and meeting the mentor. And to all of these start to blend together a little bit in A New Hope. And later I'll show you why I think they start to blend together, because I think in the grand scheme of things, um, A New Hope in particular doesn't take Luke all the way through the hero's journey. It's actually
Oh God, no! It takes
the
all
whole
three.
trilogy.
Yeah.
Um, and
Unlike Han, like Han does his in one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what's really cool though is A New Hope does capture the hero's journey really well, but it's not like the whole movie's the hero's journey, but it's like just perfect to just set up the stage for future things. Um, but basically what happens here, this call to adventure, refusal to call, and meeting the mentor all kind of happen in sync, where Obi-Wan is revealing the reality of the special world to Luke. Like, hey, you're living in this ordinary place, and this call you've been feeling to something
Much
greater.
larger universe. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, I will be your tour guide, your guru, your spiritual mentor, so to speak. Like, I will take you into this place that you're longing to be. But immediately what ends up happening is Luke is still in that first step. He still has one foot in the ordinary world. And that's where he's like, oh, I can't. Like, this is the guy who wanted to leave off world. And then all of a sudden it shows up and he says,
He's scared.
I can't go. I can't go to
Yeah.
Alderaan. And why I think that's so important is it's so relatable. In the hero's journey, like, we're brought right into his story, and it's just like, man, he's just like us. Like,
Yeah.
he's just so afraid of change and of something going completely wrong, like what happens. But what I really like about this, and you brought it up, and I would love to hear you speak about it. But basically, he's forced into making a decision, and that's where we actually get into number 5 here, crossing the threshold. So this is where Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are brutally murdered, cooked alive. Basically, they're incinerated. And so, like, for you, with kind of like crossing that threshold, like stepping into a new realm, so to speak, this new world that he's never experienced, like, how do you see that play out in Luke's story?
I don't think he takes that step until I don't think he really takes that step until Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird because crossing the threshold for me really happens for him in Return of the Jedi. I mean, like, he travels a lot, but you never see him do like a Rey, right? I've never seen so much green in the world. Like, he's just still that Tatooine kid the whole time. And just like, you don't see him make that change until RTJ. But what I thought was funny, it was kind of exactly what you were saying, refusal of the call. It's interesting because, yeah, what young guy do you know? I mean, I know I was that guy. You're full of piss and vinegar. You want to get out. You hate the situation. But as soon as it comes up, you refuse it, right? But his hand was forced because now he has nothing. And that's what we were talking about with the deleted scenes. There's nothing left for him now. And so the only thing he has is Ben and this hope about a story that he knew his father. So he's the closest thing that he has to family. When it comes to crossing the threshold, I could see it being when he talks to Han. I think that could be an example, just because it's like, all right, now he's really taking the step. They're booking the ticket and they're getting off world. You know what I mean? Or maybe when they're getting shot at in the hangar.
Yeah, and one thing I see, I would I'm interested in that idea of Return of the Jedi being crossing the threshold. And one thing it can be as well is George Lucas put so much of Joseph Campbell's like cyclical nature in
Yeah.
this to where he keeps there's like these multiple thresholds he crosses.
Yeah.
Because I see this as like he's being forced to cross the threshold in terms of like this inner desire that you have in this guy Obi-Wan, this mentor who's really like, I will be your like a supernatural aid, like in really guiding you in your destiny. Like this is something you're supposed to do. He's
Hmm.
not that forward with it, but then all of a sudden it catches up with him, and he's like, "Are you gonna suffer the same fate as your aunt and uncle, or are you going to take a step forward?" And to me, that seems like a catalyst where he's just like, "I'll do it." Because in this one in particular, Joseph Campbell, he writes about this is where like even with the imagery of the circle, this descent takes place where basically what ends up happening is it's a symbolic entry into his inner world. And this is like what's really interesting is he gets into this place where Joseph Campbell, he would write about in the hero's journey, like in all of this mythology, basically right off the bat, he gets introduced to this fringe group of misfits and people.
Right.
And I think about the cantina, and it's like basically there's a lot of these manifestations, of kind of like how he feels like what if he ends up like all of these people who go off world all of the time, like what if he ends up
Yeah.
being like that, like the ordinary world was safe for him, but there's so much at risk.
Maybe
And
that's a better example then, is crossing the threshold is right before they go into Mos Eisley. And Ben, who's somebody who's very familiar with this wretched hive of scum and villainy, takes him down there, and that's his first step into the rest of the galaxy, however small it may be.
yeah, because it's like he does see just all sorts of stuff and people and species of aliens that he's never seen before, and it's like
And some
even
serious violence
yeah.
immediately. Yeah.
And and I read the novelization, earlier, and I understand that you couldn't do this, but it's like Obi-Wan cut someone in half in the cantina, and just thinking of the script treatment with, like you said, extreme violence. It's
Yeah.
like yeah, like we fight off and scare off Tusken Raiders and animals and
By
creatures,
screaming. Yeah.
but it's like but not like a laser sword coming out and slicing somebody's limb off and
Right.
all of this craziness. Um,
Which I still think he reacted interestingly to that. Like, I felt like he was totally okay. Like, Luke just
yeah,
handles this stuff very well.
yeah, that's for sure. And before we start getting into this second stage here, I'll say what's up to some people. This is a little slower interaction with the chat, but if you guys kind of add to the conversation, we can pull it up. But the missus, hello, glad you're watching. Ladaj, love both you guys. Thanks. Bichu, what up, nerd? What's up?
What up, nerd?
I'm gonna try and say your name and probably butcher it.
Miracus?
Yeah, Mirikis, Chapman. Hello there. Hello. Novak, what's up?
Yeah, what up, Novak?
What's up? Coffee on Corban. Timothy, how's it going?
What's up, brother?
So basically what we have here, 1 through 5, these first 5 steps, this is really the first stage, which you could say is basically his life, especially Luke Skywalker, in the ordinary world. So with Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, basically you have this establishment here of, okay, this is the life that he is not going back to one way or another.
Well, and
Um,
4 is so important too. Before we leave it, 4 is
yeah,
super important because it establishes 6, 7, 8, 9.
for sure.
Because meeting the mentor really establishes, hey, you're connected to this special world. Your father
Yeah,
was part of this special world. This
Yeah.
weapon that you have is part of this special world. I fought in this special world, and you're connected to all of it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great point because it does give context for what he's entering into. Um, because I mean, imagine if it's just like if he saw the message from Leia and decided to go out on his own, it would be like,
Oh, you'd be in trouble.
yeah, but he definitely has someone guiding him. And so then what we enter into, really you could call this like a second act of the story. This is his Luke Skywalker's initiation into the special world. And just to jump ahead, so it kind of helps frame the hero's journey. A successful hero's journey would really end up with this conquering of the special world, and in particular, a conquering of um, all kinds of evil and temptations within, and you're returning back to the ordinary world that you left with what you've received and changing that world. And so when he crosses the threshold and he's going into initiation, really it's like he's being thrown into the deep end of the pool, so
Right.
to speak. And so um, this is where, when we start getting into the special world, this is where this simplified really helps right here. But what I'll do is I'll bring up some other things along the way that will be helpful for this discussion, because there are 5 additional steps in what's listed here, and it does start to get
I was going to say, I would
pretty intense.
add something extremely important that I don't see on the simplified one,
Yeah,
and I would put a big capital F failure.
yeah, for sure.
That's the one I don't see.
Yeah, and right at the bottom of this, where the ordeal is, there's a whole section there that somewhat deals with that. And what's really interesting when it gets there's a really unique parallel between Anakin and Luke that maybe it'll end up being a whole nother discussion. We'll
I'm
see.
interested
But
there.
so with going into number 6, with this descent into the special world, the way Joseph Campbell describes this is basically it's like the protagonist is taking this dive into something unknown, and at the same time this great beast from the depths is coming up to meet him. So there's this tension and this chaos that's happening, and it's just really about to get really, I don't want to say like insane, but there's a lot of growth and potential failure that's going to happen. Like the stakes are very, very high. I saw this. You're good guys. You've both become 2 of the few to pronounce my name correctly without me having to lend aid. Not many people have accomplished that.
What can I say?
Awesome.
We're scholars, gentlemen.
Yes, yes.
Yes, literaries.
What an appropriate stream to pronounce that name right. Glad you're here, man. So basically what ends up happening with tests, allies, and enemies in the hero's journey is the first thing that you enter into with tests, when you're looking at Luke Skywalker, is really start to have all of these trials that emerge. And in particular, what happens is Luke really meets what could be called, like, kind of what Joseph Campbell described as his shadow self. So basically, this is where Han Solo comes into play. And so, a side note, Han Solo has his own hero's journey, but Han Solo is also this embodiment of what would happen if Luke chooses incorrectly. And if he fails these trials, he can end up like early Han Solo before he completes his hero's journey. Because Han Solo has tremendous self-reliance. He does have a lot of greed. He's motivated by money, and he even belittles the use of the Force and ancient hokey religions and all of this.
Yeah.
And so, really, right off the bat, he's met his mentor. Like you were
Also, we
bringing
know
up.
he's like cold-blooded.
Yeah, yeah, and he just straight up just kills because he's like, I'm not going to deal with this. Like,
And he's used to it. They established that
mhm.
this is something he's comfortable with.
Oh yeah, and it's such a great parallel that I starting to look in this a little more. I hadn't really considered Han Solo as this. I knew he was opposite, but it's like Luke could have ended up like him. Luke could have rejected everything and just kind of like made his own way because he crossed the threshold. He could not return to his ordinary world. He was going to return changed, but it's like, how was that change going to take
Right.
place? Um, but here, they go to the Death Star. There's this descent deeper into all of these trials that take place. Um, and there's something interesting that happens in the middle of all of this. But in terms of Han Solo, before I get too far ahead of myself, do you have anything else you're kind of racking your mind on with Han Solo?
Not really. I feel like I don't want to touch it because that's a great conversation to see how Han goes through this himself, just in A
Yeah,
New Hope.
yeah,
I don't want to detract from the Luke story, so
yeah. No, and that's what's like when you just self isolate with Luke Skywalker. It's hard to not consider Luke's hero's journey and to
yeah,
consider you could even say Leia and Kenobi, and there's so many characters where it's not just like it's about Luke Skywalker.
yeah,
There's so many other people.
yeah.
um
And that's the beautiful thing about George, man. I mean, the
yeah.
storytelling is multifaceted. This is not just Luke's story. I mean, yes, we get to focus on him a lot. And what's interesting is since this was written as a one-off movie, in the beginning, you could say that this entire thing happened in one movie, and yet
Mhm.
somehow he was able to stretch it out to three and make it work.
Yeah, and it is very, very interesting how he put all of his eggs in one basket with Luke, but also laid a framework that if he got to make his subsequent movies,
Yeah,
he
there
could
was
keep
room to
doing it.
wiggle.
It's
Yeah,
like it's so brilliant.
what a baller!
Yeah.
What a
But
baller!
what's up, Sheev? What's up, Nick?
Oh,
What's up, Legendary Tron? Honor to have the three of you guys here with us. Um, so during this whole hero's journey, um, that George Lucas is adapting from Joseph Campbell, basically what ends up happening when he's going into tests and when he's going into really descending into the depths of this journey, there's this process that Joseph Campbell writes about called synthesis. And there's a very, very interesting scene where this takes place where Luke is essentially blurring the lines of his identity. And this is where Luke and Han are both in the stormtrooper outfit and they both have helmets on. Like, just from a physical appearance, they look exactly the same. And
I mean, he's
it's,
a little short.
yeah, he definitely is. Um, but it's what's interesting there is even just maybe it's reading too much into it, but just the symbology of like there's even more interchangeable I guess outcomes with Luke and Han. And like he could go one of a few ways. He could go full well into the dark side, or he could full well become the hero, and it's the lines do start to blur a little bit. But then he ends up going into this phase with allies, which Joseph Campbell basically describes as like you'd be meeting. He called it like meeting with the goddess. So essentially, what this was, if you think about like in his journey, there's this embodiment of what Luke longs for and what he wants to become. Like he's been exposed to this world and he wants this moral high ground. He wants like he's being shown the Death Star and Alderaan and all this stuff. And there's something about like, okay, we need to rescue this person. And it's like essentially what ends up happening here is he's been shown this negative side through Han. And granted, we've said we're putting a pause on Han's hero's journey, but he's been shown this shadow self, and it's also he's been shown Leia. So it's kind of like you can think about Catholicism, like when you see this picture of like the angel on the shoulder, the devil on the shoulder. This kind of, I mean, it's not really like a religious teaching, but typically you kind of see this idea that's being portrayed a lot. But really, he's kind of showed this yin and yang, this good and evil, and so he starts falling into temptation. And
Hmm.
what do you think about that?
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. I think at this point, Luke has no idea what he's doing. And so he's flying by the seat of his pants, but he has one singular objective, which is we got one lead, basically, we can go on. I hear the name Rebellion, and I hear Princess that helps Rebellion, and, Kenobi knew my father. Like, this is the only thing I have to go on right now. This is the only way I can connect with my true self. Who knows me? Where do I come from? What's the real story here? And so he's going for that 1,000%. He doesn't care about, I mean, I think morality is tough at this point because I don't think he really has a sense of what's good and bad. He's like, yeah, Empire bad. Cause why? Cause they're big. I don't know. They killed my,
Yeah.
aunt and uncle, but, he's really just trying to find an answer, I think, at that point. And I don't know if it's really like he's being influenced by Han or Leia as like an angel and a demon on his shoulder, that he's really just trying to find some answers. I don't know if that's coming out right. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, at least to me, for you and me here, maybe the chat's like, what the heck? But, for you and me, it totally makes sense because I think part of the hero's journey is that I don't want to say confusion, but there's some ambiguity in like he's trying to discern what is he supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because for us, the viewer, we have this experience where we can watch almost in real time, like, hey, very clearly there's something wrong here. But for him, even
He was
in the
talking about going to
beginning,
the academy.
he was, and to him, he's like, yeah, why would I not go? That these are the good guys, and then he gets this exposure where it's like, hey, life isn't basically what you thought. The people you wanted to join aren't actually good. And then they go to the planet and it's gone.
Yeah.
And then they get pulled in and all of this chaos starts happening. And then there's violence like right off the bat. Coffee on Corvon says, I get what you're saying, X-Wing. So there we go. But what's kind of moving past these few meetings, and what's really important in the hero's journey is it's never a solo journey. It's not this like go off and do it on your own. Like already, he has been introduced to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's been introduced to Han Solo and Leia, and all of them play a different role. And it's very interesting as well on the Death Star, how basically Kenobi is like, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. You guys do this. Like there's this foreshadowing right off at the beginning where it's like their own journeys are taking different directions. So what ends up happening in the tests, really, with test allies, enemies, this whole thing, we start to go into the simplified step 7 here, which would be the approach to the Inmost cave. And for just for disclaimer, we're still in A New Hope, but really really quickly you're going to see kind of a spoiler. I don't think in the whole grand scheme of things we actually aren't as far in this journey as we're describing in A New Hope. There is, like X-Wing talked about, there's this paradox of A New Hope is all inclusive, but then there's a bigger story at
Dude,
play.
as soon as you hit Empire, you roll right back to number 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what gets incredibly interesting is like you think you're like, man, Luke is by the end of A New Hope, you're like, he's the hero.
Yeah.
And he is, but then you realize that the stakes are so much higher. And it's like, you're just barely
Yeah.
getting into it. So 7 here, the approach to the inmost cave, basically you can think about this as the temptation, like you were talking about, for complete failure or for complete success. Like this determines where you will end up in the hero's journey. So in particular, basically what is shown here is if he when we're looking at how things are playing out, like if he's going to rush to save um if he's going to rush to save Kenobi, all these different things, basically what can happen is he can end up failing. And when we get to Empire Strikes Back, I think what's fairly interesting is I think there's a almost like an alternate reality that could happen where Luke would end up like Anakin. He would end up like his father, who I think in his own hero's journey failed the temptations. When he got to the place where the the biggest struggles internally are what took him out. But basically, you also see here that the worst and the best, I guess, potential and the heart and mind of Luke are being played out with Han and Leia. Like this theme just keeps digging. But what's fairly interesting as well is like we talked about, Joseph Campbell described this descent of the protagonist and this ascent of this beast where they would eventually meet. And he would often talk about like water being this metaphor and being like pulled down into like this watery grave or this watery hell, basically, where you had to, yeah, and you had to die and be reborn in this. And so even in A New Hope, it's interesting, in the trash compactor, you have this whole scene where like everything is collapsing and like this could very well be the end. And things end up going better, and it's this metaphor for what's happening. But let's do this. For brevity's sake, we'll quickly kind of move through the rest of A New Hope and then get into where I think the hero's journey gets really, really exciting in Empire Strikes Back.
I'm still just interested about 7. I feel like it's not resolved. What is the inmost cave for 7?
So in terms,
because I feel like it got almost, I don't know about skipped or if it was just super brief, right?
yeah,
It's just that moment when Kenobi puts his saber up and he gets killed. And then Luke is confronted with the fact that now his last tie, basically to everything he has or he knows, is lost in that moment.
yeah, and I think you're right on. I think it's starting to tie together not only what takes place in the trash compactor, but also being faced with what's a little complicated about the way George wrote it is number 8, the ordeal would be the loss of the mentor. That would be the loss of Kenobi. So
But they
yeah,
add in the whole,
the whole and what's interesting, even with Joseph Campbell, he talks about the hero has this inner voice of his mentor afterwards. And so George took that and made it into a force ghost.
right.
And so it's like the mentor's never really gone. The mentor's like internalized, but with Kenobi in particular, he does become a force ghost. But you're right, the approach into Inmost Cave does kind of get passed over a bit in A New Hope because again, in the grand scheme of things, like you and I were talking about, when you're looking at A New Hope to Return of the Jedi, we're not really this far into the special world yet.
Right.
I want to give a special shout out to Charlie.
Yo, what up,
My
brother?
man, you have more than you know. You have inspired this little series. You said, "Oh my God, Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. I love this. I will have to rewatch this for the whole thing. This is my jam." Also, hello.
What a whole thing.
Oh yeah, it's so great to have you here, man. Coffee on Corban, or can I say Timothy? I mean, I know that was what your channel was called, but great point. X-Wing. Kenobi was the last thing in the entire galaxy that was left from his past. He had nothing after that but the new journey. Yes. And hello. Okay. And
one more. Hit him up.
and
What up,
hello.
Vori? What's up, dude?
It's funny when I was trying to pronounce. I just call him Vor. When I was trying to pronounce his name, he's like, just call me Vor.
Just call him Ellen.
Ellen.
Yep, Ellen.
Like DeGeneres, Ellen.
Yep. Ellen.
Okay.
That's 100% correct. Yeah, Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah.
Smile. Okay. So, I'm really resisting the urge to dive into Empire Strikes Back so we can have the completion of A New Hope here. So basically,
to be fair,
yeah.
though, I don't want to interrupt you, but to be
Yeah.
fair, could we not agree that 1 through 5 could be considered A New Hope, and then you could move into 6 into Empire?
Yeah, I would agree.
Because you could this is tough to say, but 5 is almost crossing the threshold, is almost losing Ben, and now you have nothing. You have nothing left. And now you're crossing the threshold into this special world completely by yourself. You got no support. You got no backup. You got to find your own way. And now you're in the special world by yourself.
Dude, absolutely. Because even like if you watch interviews with Joseph Campbell, he even talks about the threshold is like crossing the threshold isn't a singular event.
Right.
It can take time. So I think from the cantina, actually, I would even reel it back a little further. I would say from Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru dying, being murdered, to the end of A New Hope, I would say that's step 5 in Luke's life.
I can agree.
That's him crossing the threshold because there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of stuff that happens here. But this is where it does get a little weird, and why it makes sense that there's a bigger picture at play, because a lot is really skipped pretty quickly, and you get to you kind of get a step 9 with the trench run.
Yeah.
But you also have a little bit of 10, the road back. There's a second threshold where you're crossing back into the real world. And basically what you have there, it's kind of called the magical flight, is what Joseph Campbell called it. So basically there's this evil force trying to pull the protagonist back down into the abyss. Like they've made it through the lowest point, and while they're receiving victory and they're learning, crossing that final threshold is really a huge part of the hero's journey. Granted, in Luke's life, it's not there, but in A New Hope, you're getting this. And not only do you have, in one sense, Darth Vader in the TIE Fighter and the Death Star trying to just get Luke and the rebels back to their base, like trying to say, you will not take us out, go back. But you also have Vader trying to either kill him or just get Luke to just stop entirely. And so Luke could have easily just been like, nope, this is too much for me, and took off. But then obviously you have the Death Star explosion. You also him crossing the threshold, the resurrection in A New Hope, when he is really completely reborn as a hero, self-inclusive in A New Hope, is when he puts away his targeting computer, fires, listens to the voice of his mentor, and everybody's like, what are you doing? This is like the worst thing you could do. And then he's given an award, and he's honored for what he has accomplished and all of this. And so that's pretty much in A New Hope, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Before moving on, do you have any final thoughts on that? Because now this, I mean, granted, this to me is like really fun stuff, but it gets really, really exciting starting Empire Strikes Back.
Next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I only have till 8. So
Okay.
we got 10 minutes. I don't know if we want to deep dive now starting Empire or we want to do Empire next week. But yeah, it's interesting because the road back is another one for me that gets kind of skippy,
Yeah.
right? The road back is like, well, it's not a heroic return to Tatooine. He doesn't want to go back to Tatooine.
Yeah.
The road back now at this point is to his new family, to Yavin, to the only family he has at this point, the rebels, right?
Yeah.
And Han and Luke and Leia, which is interesting because what's the resurrection if the road back is to Yavin? You know, how does the resurrection take place before the road back? You know what I mean? The return with the elixir, I would consider the ceremony.
Yeah.
The medal ceremony. I don't know. That part's just muddy for me.
But I think that exact feeling and what you're tapping into is a lot like we're seeing foreshadowing, and so it's hard to hit it particularly.
Right.
And been like, this is exactly because the whole point of that return with the elixir is that he's able to take what he went through in his experiences and teach that to others and really have them start with everything he's experienced, which really you see in like the EU and you see in George Lucas's treatment for the sequels and all of this, where like Luke takes that very thing and builds the new Jedi Order and things are completely different. And so I feel that same way where it's like when you limit it to A New Hope, it does get kind of muddy and it does become like a trudge, if that makes sense. Like it slows down.
Well, and you go like 8, 11, 9, 12,
Yep.
7,
Yep.
10, 11. Like it just like I can see points for all of it,
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's do this for the last few minutes. While I have you, there's one thing in particular that I find really interesting about this, and then I might share like a few more thoughts after you hop off. But then if you're free next week, both you and I, let's do it again and keep digging deeper into this.
I want to get all the way through this.
Yeah, for sure. Got I love mythology. Yep, and then Luke trusts me, or Luke trust me. Luke turned off your targeting computer. Yep, crossing the threshold.
See,
So
I would
right
call
there,
that seizing this. I would call that seizing the sword.
And I think in terms of A New Hope, it could be, but I wonder in the grand scheme of things, like we're talking about, if that was a crossing the threshold into his journey. Like that's when he finally took a step into the descent.
But then the end would have to be test allies and enemies because he's tested, right, by using the Force. The ally would be Han coming back in, and the enemy would be Vader trying to take him out.
Yeah. 100%, Charlie. That would be super, super cool. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yes. That'd be so cool. The three of us can absolutely do that. Doing a stream with me would be a dream come true.
I thought mustaches on Mustafar was like a thing that was gonna,
yeah, this Friday. Humbling. I would say dream bigger. I mean, catching me, but all right. But I really do appreciate it, man. Really, man. I love talking with you about this. Thank you. Well, X-Wing, what I can do now, if you need to, you could pop off, and then I'll just kind of give. I'm not gonna go super deep dive into it. For this, I'll kind of give like a little bit longer, just kind of going through it so people can see the rest of the hero's journey. And then with Charlie, if he's available next week, we can do just like a little bit deeper dive from Empire Strikes Back forward. So, my friend, if people don't know who you are, what's something you have coming up before you take off? And I'll make sure to put your channel in the link or in
I
the chat
appreciate you,
here.
man. Yeah, and I just do community streams. I love hanging out and talking to nerds. So that's what I do. We do it every week.
Your community streams are friggin' sweet, and you've been doing a lot of like building and collecting streams too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love building stuff. Obviously, I have a lot of plastic around and I like to build things. I'm like Anakin.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
to
seriously.
build things and yeah, I don't know. I just love Star Wars. So I really don't have like an avenue. I'm sure I could be a super successful YouTube channel if I had an avenue I wanted to stick with, but that's not why I did this. So I'm just gonna
Mhm.
keep I'm gonna keep doing stuff that I enjoy. And if it
Cool.
takes forever for nothing to happen, then that's fine.
Yeah, I think at the end of it, you just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
I'm at.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. Yeah, we'll definitely get Charlie on because I mean he is like the guru
Oh yeah.
for the hero's journey stuff.
Yeah. That'd be fun. So thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you. If you haven't, go check out the merch for Mr. Nerds and Mrs. Nerds. I'm sorry.
Greedo
Yo,
hit the
hit the
floor.
flow. These things are actually really comfy, man. I'm not
Oh,
gonna lie. Oh my
I'm glad.
god. I love it. Okay, take care. Okay.
All
I'll see
right.
you shortly.
See ya. And then there was one. So for everybody here, what I'm gonna do, I'm really glad that Charlie wants to hop in on this. So I'm gonna give through Return of the Jedi pretty much a synopsis of how George Lucas used the hero's journey in regards to moving Luke Skywalker's story ahead. And then we'll dedicate a whole stream next week to Empire Strikes Back forward. So basically, we've gone through A New Hope. And then what you end up with is this really unique thing um, that takes place in regards to Luke kind of trailing back in his journey. Like we thought the journey was complete, but it's really not. You find out that there is a little more to the story, so to speak. But you know what? I'm gonna take a quick pause for a second. Charlie, in Discord, I'm gonna send you a link just in case you are available. If you want to pop in now, actually, I don't know if you're free, but if you want to pop in now, I'm gonna send you a StreamYard link. I just wanted to say that. Okay. So I just sent that off, Charlie. So if I was just thinking, you know what, you're actually, if you're available now, yeah, go ahead and accept that and pop on. I'd love to even talk now with you. So what ends up happening with Luke Skywalker? Refocus myself in Empire Strikes Back when you're reintroduced to Luke on Hoth and at Echo Base. You see a very different Luke. So you see that his journey has progressed in quite a very unique way, and that he is different than that young boy we saw on Tatooine. Because remember, when he's looking at the binary sunset and he's seeing the two suns, he's really seeing this duality of I can go one of two directions. I can stay on Tatooine and be stuck in the ordinary world, or I can actually go into something far greater than I could have ever imagined. And with the events of A New Hope, he is plunged straight into this world that really, like Charlie said, who it looks like he might be popping in, but he's crossing that threshold with putting away the targeting computer, the destruction of the first Death Star. He's entering in to the special world. Like he's just started to scratch the surface. And in Empire Strikes Back in particular, you're starting to see these tests where he's out in the elements for longer and Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up and he's taken by the Wampa and he's using the Force to pull his lightsaber into into his hand, these different things that you haven't seen happen before. And oh, here he is.
Hey, man.
How is it going, Charlie?
Oh man, you got my jazz, dude. I got
Dude,
here hella late, but I am so sorry. But dude, I studied this in college. I love
oh
watching it
wow.
through. I love watching it through Star Wars, obviously. Then, literally echoing everything from what Lord of the Rings to countless other things. So please catch me up. I am sorry. Where you at?
Oh, no, you're good, man. And for those of you who don't know Charlie, first off, dude, you are one of the most positive people I've ever met.
Oh
You're an
man,
incredible guy. But
thank
I
you.
love hearing you talk about the hero's journey. I didn't know you studied it in college. That's really, really cool.
It was one of my
Um,
friends.
that's really awesome. So basically, so far, we have talked about kind of how the hero's journey for Luke has
Mhm.
two aspects to it. First would be it's a little self-enclosed in A New Hope in terms of storytelling, but then you
Okay.
realize Empire Strikes Back forward that there's actually more to the journey, that he's actually not as far as you thought he was.
Right.
Because you kind of get this glimpse of, okay, maybe he is a hero, at the end. But then when you see him in Empire, it's like, oh wow, he's just starting,
The
you know.
Descent. Yes.
Yep. Um, so let's just start going through this.
Sure.
Basically, what I'm looking at here is what's really interesting is on Hoth,
Mhm.
you're starting to get this descent, and we've said it a few times, but for those who don't know, basically Joseph Campbell and Charlie, correct me at any time if I'm wrong. If you're like, hey, here's a little
You're good, man.
clarification. So basically, the protagonist is descending into the special world, this fantastic world, and at the same time, there is this like approaching beast of the deep, and eventually they're going to connect. There's going to be this abyss, the darkest, deepest moments of this protagonist's life where he is
The
met
belly
with
of
either
hell.
complete failure or complete success. And what's interesting about George's treatment is he does meet his mentor in A New Hope, but then also you have Yoda that comes in with Dagobah, and
Mhm.
you really start getting into the tests here, in my opinion. And
Trials. Yep.
and I would love to hear what you think. I've always, this whole kind of Joseph Campbell meeting with the goddess, I could see how Leia can fill that role in A New Hope, but I also think Yoda kind of fills this role. What do you think about that?
Well, dude, again, props for this, man. Like a lot of people go towards the effects and more power to you, but diving into the gold of everything of why and how George did what he did is literally this stuff right here. So
Yeah.
props to you for that. But okay, so yeah, call to adventure, refusal to call. Yep, okay. And you were talking about crossing the threshold, meeting the mentor. Okay, roger that.
Yeah,
So
and this was like a simplified
mhm,
one that I put up, so it doesn't have all 17 steps here,
okay,
and we're kind of going over all 17, but so feel free to go off of the
okay,
simplified
roger
here as
that, man.
well.
I may have to get a thing of water in a second, but hell's yeah, dude. Okay, so yeah, I think the goddess figure, it could possibly be Leia, and in many ways, it could be anybody. I mean, not
Mm,
like anybody, but up to the point of okay, you're going if you're diving into Empire. Again, for those who do not have not watched Sam Witwer's knowledge on stuff,
mm,
I highly recommend it because he talks about this a lot too. Um, okay, so when he gets to Dagobah, he's already pretty high on himself and feeling pretty confident about things. But however, when you come face to face with a goddess or god or a wise little person that talks backwards,
mhm,
who may be more smarter than you think than you give him credit for, and I love that aspect because it's really funny. Look, go back and watch Mark Hamill's reactions his to when he first meets Yoda to like, uh, what's it? Huh? Don't do that and everything. And you go to, of course, you know, flip the script. I cannot teach. And then all of a sudden, his face like, Ben, I am ready. Tell him I hits the head, and the rest is history. But no, the goddess, it could literally be almost anybody as far as going towards that. That's just me. Just friends along the way, but the closer you get to the abyss part, which is, I'll let you think, but it could be Yoda, it could be Leia to some extent. That could be a friend on the way. It's just, it really depends on the depiction of art. Is very subjective to what you're showing and how they receive it. So it could really be up to the person. If that made sense, I hope.
No, yeah, and I think that's what's so. I guess I'm not trying to be super flowery, but like what's so beautiful and brilliant about George Lucas and Star Wars is that it's not just this like cookie cutter. Here's exactly how you follow the hero's journey, and it's like, oh yeah, I can see all the elements in linear order, and it's perfect and it's pretty. It feels so real, and you start to see so many deep elements below the surface. Like, not only is it a fantastic film, but then you start looking at the philosophy and the mythology behind it, and you're like, wow, there's a lot that you can pull from, and people start superimposing their own life over it, and they're looking at this and they're like, well, I can see it this way. And even X-Wing and I kind of saw a little bit of different things where he's like, I kind of see this here and I see this here. So it's even with certain things, it's like you can start to almost weave your own story into it. And I think that's the beauty of the hero's journey, is not only is it a great story, it's very self-reflective. Like I guess the irony of when you're watching this character, it's not really about the external stuff, it's all about the internal. The external influences it, but it's at that same time when you're watching this journey, you start looking inward and you're like, how would I respond, or how do I see this in my life? And I think the whole point of the hero's journey is for hope, is for that there is something greater than your Monday through Friday, your day to day. There's something greater than just what you're getting stuck in. Evil can be conquered. You can defeat the abyss, the darkness within that you feel trapped in, and so that's the kind of stuff that excites me. But I see Leia here. I see Darth, actually, Maximus, and Leia Rose. What's up? Coffee and Corban, getting to bed, but great discussion tonight. Yeah, thanks for being here, man. I know it's super late where you are. What's up, T Money? Got back to your dorm after a long Monday. Hope you are doing well. Oh, well, I hope. I think it's your junior year. I hope it's treating you well, man. I hope it is. I know college is so intense. Yeah. Well, let's, I would love, let me just throw a few things out there. And in particular, I think it'd be interesting to talk about in the hero's journey, the temptations in particular that Luke is faced with in Empire Strikes Back. To me, I see the two temptations I see are when he's on Dagobah, thinking of this descent, and he has visions in the Force of his friends suffering, and it's this temptation to leave, which he gives into. But then there's also, I don't know if I would categorize this as a temptation, but I'm tempted to, the vision that he has in the Force of Vader and himself being Vader when he goes
cave. The cave. Oh, what was the quote? The cave you fear to enter is the treasure that holds. I can't remember. It's something like that. That's particularly why he wanted to use that in the film.
Yeah,
love that you brought that up, because I just remembered that from a documentary I seen a while back.
Yeah, brilliant. And there's so many incredible quotes. I mean, if anybody hasn't, I highly recommend even Cliff Notes version of The Hero with a Thousand Faces. like dig into that. Like your mind will be blown for real.
Yeah.
But for Luke in Empire Strikes Back, what do you see as his temptations, or like that full descent into the belly of the beast?
Well, it's a combo of at least 2 or 3 things. One, again, coming off of A New Hope, if I can talk right, A New Hope. You're coming off a very good high. You meet your mentor. You know, you pass your trials. You blow up the Death Star, essentially, first one. And you get to, you know, all the tests, enemies upcoming that you get, and then you finally get to a new wizard, a new person in your path, whether it be friend or foe, whether it be another wizard, which ironically enough, or a space wizard. When you get there and this little guy starts going, you know, your weapons, you will not need them. And what's in there, only what you take with you. That's why another thing I thought about the KV fear to enter. I wish I could remember that whole quote. God, I feel embarrassed about that now. But anyways, the point being is when he sees, it's very hard to pick this without thinking about Anakin, but just thinking about Luke. So when he sees Vader, of course, you see the possibility of, you know, here's a funny one. Do you remember who strikes up their saber first in the cave? This blew my brain. It blew my brain.
Is it Luke who does it first?
Yes.
Yeah, I had to think about it for a second. Yeah.
I was watching Sam Wit, where I'm going to piggyback off of what he said for this and then go into the second part what I was going to go to. So when that happens, of course, your weapons, you will not need them. What's in there? Only what you take with you. If you take in fear or you take in aggression, sound like something, go in there. So the descent, you see a villain, you see something monstrous, a dragon to be slayed, as he always used to say, Joseph Campbell. Or besides a dragon, you have a Minotaur, thousands of different things. When you slice the head off or arm or whatever, and you see the reveal, you know, the explosion happens, face, it's your own face. Whoa, wait a minute. You get this reveal of the seeing things. Could this quite possibly turn into me? To something else. So automatically you get that, you know, thing of creeping thing in your gut where you're like, I don't know, it's weird. You go back, and even you go to when he's testing the rocks out, and the X-wing lift. You know, how, you know, it's too big, can't do it. And then Yoda just goes like that. I don't believe it, you know. What? That's why you failed. You didn't believe. You know, thousands of different things. The next would be, for me, would be obviously losing of a certain part of your body. And the big reveal could cause death of the character, as well as much as the thing itself is the hand, I am your father. There's a big choice there that could be, are you going to jump off? Are you going to fall off? Or are you going to take this person's hand, who is responsible, that you, from all that you know, is responsible for atrocities to the Empire, but at the same time you learn, but is this true? Is he really my father? Is this true? And you, like, you know, search your feelings, you know it to be true, all that. So you're hit with a massive thing. So ironically enough, the descent, besides falling, you're falling in your mind. You're falling into your madness, your own madness. You're trying to come up with something, and that leads into quite possibly the next. Those are just very few things that I pick up on. That's just me.
No, yeah, man, and that's great. And I couldn't remember his quote either, but I pulled it up and I wanted to say it. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Treasure you seek. Yep. Okay. I knew I was okay.
You
Thank you.
were right there. I was like, I can't finish it either.
Oh man, that's embarrassing. Thank you for that.
No,
Save,
it's
sir.
all good. Thank you, Google. Thank you, Google, for
Right. I know.
being able to save it. No, but I think what's so interesting about the whole idea of the hero's journey, and I love how much you touched on. Obviously, we're looking at through the lens of Star Wars, but when you look at Joseph Campbell's work,
Brilliant, man.
obviously Star Wars isn't a part of that. Like his original work, you know, you're seeing the stories of like Knights of the Round Table, or you're seeing Greek mythology, and you're seeing all of these things throughout history, these stories that have been told, and you can see it. And I love so much when you're looking at the temptation, there's this idea of if you fail, you're stuck in the belly of the beast forever.
Yeah.
And you can't leave. Like if you give in to this temptation, this pull of evil, this descent of madness interior, or in the interior of your soul, it's like you end up getting trapped. And I think, you know, in particular, I think in episode 3, I think Anakin on Mustafar fails a temptation, and he ends up getting stuck in the belly of the beast.
Yes.
And obviously the treatment for that was not there in terms of like how well it was fleshed out when, you know, Empire was written and stuff. But then at the same time, it's like if you succeed this temptation, like the greatest triumph is ahead of you. And so it's incredibly interesting to me, because we start to play into when you have this whole idea too. I know we're kind of hopping around, but
no, it's okay.
When we have this whole idea of meeting with the goddess, and I know Joseph Campbell talked quite a bit about this. It would be representative of this maternal side of the hero's story, or maybe even representing his own mom and ideals and things like this. I guess that part of the story, and with Luke not knowing his mother or father, knowing his aunt and uncle, you know, it's interesting seeing how Padme could maybe be represented through Leia, things like this. But then at the same time, you start during this descent, you have this connection with the father, and you know, seeing all of this play out, like it's just so interesting to me, because it ends up all culminating in you know, there's the ordeal and all this, the loss of mentor, but the death and rebirth, you know, just right at the bottom. And I think where this culminates for me, where I see this, and I would love to hear what you think. But before that, I know T Money, I think he may already have taken off. He says he's got an 8 a.m. class. He's got to head to bed. He'll catch the replay. Hope you have a great night. Well, if you're watching the replay, bro, hope you slept well. I hope you did, and hope college treats you well. But for me, the death and rebirth of Luke in Empire, I think, is after finding out Vader is his father, and I think he threw himself down with the intent of, I'll die.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather die than become you. With what, even though I would say, obviously he left Dagobah prematurely, I would say for him, there's not only this like literal physical descent and this very real sense of he was willing to die, but I think the rebirth is when he's picked up and he's rescued by his friends. And it's like, okay, you can do this. You've made it through. You did not join your father, and you were literally he died to his inner self. And it's like I will never go down that path. And so does any of that connect with what you're thinking, or what do you think for that?
Again, brilliant. Because because I've heard a couple things just almost identical, but that was well worded, good sir. Yeah, because when yeah, it's very good to think about stuff like that, because whenever, spoilers, when he falls down the
Yeah.
shaft and everything like that, right? And yeah, I really do think that he was, just at that point, will of the force, didn't even know about it at the time, but just, if I die, I die, but I'm not gonna
Mm-hmm.
do that. I'm not gonna join that. I'm not gonna be a part of that. Maybe subconsciously on some level, but that's not until way of Return of the Jedi, into
Yeah.
like the Redeemer chapter of it. But that's a whole thing. But no, whenever that happens, I 100% agree with that. Whenever, even calling out and using the gifts that you've been given on the way, Leia, hear me, Leia. I don't think up until then Luke had even thought about that ability. I that automatically just came to him. And whether that be irony or just something else differently, I love that idea of just, he's hanging there. He's only got, spoilers, one arm. Just like, okay, well, this is it then. But I'm gonna try something. Maybe reached out to a greater good. Maybe reaching out to something. If works, cool. Then you get Leia, and she goes, Luke, we have to turn around, and then that whole thing goes and picked up like that. But I can 100% that being a death and a rebirth. That's very well said that you said that, because even going the way they shot the thing. Remember how the Falcon's like top part even opened up and it looked like a white light? I can easily see that as when Lando's coming up to pick Luke up, or even just catch him, I guess. I can't remember whether they cut that out or not. But yeah, and then obviously go to that, Ben, why didn't you tell me? And then wrestle with that even more, but just that leaming thought of, I love this, man. I love this. I really do. This is good. That's good point, sir.
And X-Wing says, "Oh, I see how it is, bro. You when Charlie pops in the chat, you cannot deny Charlie's wisdom. You got to be like, pull Charlie in, 100%.
Come on.
But something else that's interesting that Joseph Campbell talks about quite a bit is he talks about boons. So he talks about these things that are very beneficial and helpful to people, and only the hero can distribute or teach or share these boons with others, because they are the ones conquering these things and learning. And what I find so fascinating is with Luke in particular, I think what you brought up with him calling out in the Force, I almost wonder if that is like the beginning of him like sharing a boon with Leia. Like he learned from Obi-Wan that you can reach out in the Force.
Yeah.
And we don't see him explicitly being trained in doing that, but then with visions and all of this stuff, it's like he's trying something. And I love Carrie Fisher and the way like her face, like she sells that so much, and just the way it's like, the way she's receiving it, him reaching out through the Force is just fantastic.
100%, man. Yeah, and then ironically enough, she kind of has a little hero's journey of that, but that's here and there. But yeah, man, it's again really fascinating just to think about little stuff like this and just trying to line stuff like this up, like, oh, and then again, like whenever you get to the Falcon, pick him up, I'll be back, and everything like that, and you're trying to get out of here. You're getting a Skype call from your space wizard dad, going, yeah, Luke, join me. And then ironically, starts saying son instead of Luke. Mm-hmm. And then he says just one time, Father. So that looming little thing of should I or shouldn't I, which sets up Return of the Jedi even more. of, did Luke did he go bad? Because for those who never seen it before, it's really brilliant. Not reaching too far ahead for Return of the Jedi, but I love the fact that they set up where maybe he did turn to the dark side. Maybe he did. He's kind of wearing black, and he just choked 2 guards. That's a Darth Vader move. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Death and Rebirth, I 100% agree with that. 1000%. You hit the nail on the head on that one, man.
And what I find so interesting about how George chooses to use the hero's journey is that that's where he pretty much stops in the middle of his trilogy. And so, like with A New Hope, at least you have some kind of pseudo hero's journey where it completes in a little bit, you know, the satisfaction. And then when you're introduced in Empire Strikes Back, you're like, oh wait, there's a lot more. Like we're not as far as we thought we were.
Yeah.
And then it ends and you're like, I mean, it's very much like Lord of the Rings, where you're like, that's how it ends?
Right.
No, like, come on, we can't end here. We need more. Like, but it is interesting because I love the time gaps in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Empire and Return of the Jedi, because you see incredible growth in between them. And it does, like, at least for me, in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, looking through the lens of the hero's journey, you're like, okay, I see the very positive descent, as strange as that is. Like, you're conquering the descent into your madness and into evil and the temptations and all of this. And it hasn't fully gotten started, but you're moving the right direction. But then, like you said, at the beginning of Return, all of a sudden you're like,
yeah.
Did you? Because then there's this whole thread that Joseph Campbell talks about when he's talking about like refusal of the return, like essentially with Darth Vader, with his dad saying, almost you can almost think about this like, go the other direction, like go back, stay with me. Either he can't go back to the ordinary world, so to speak, but there is this temptation to do so, or to just go back and to actually give into the temptation. And at the beginning, there's not a whole lot of context given. We're just kind of left to figure it out for ourselves.
Yeah, he's just he's hanging out in the belly of the beast for all that everyone else knows until, you know, the weld is eventually destroyed, which ironically enough is like the mental shielding of Vader. And then you get to learn the story of how that weld gulped him up, or however your translation want to goes to that. It's very brilliant. This is so cool, man. I really appreciate this so much.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Nerding out over this.
Yeah, but, and I'll make sure I'll start like a group chat with you and X-Wing as well, and awesome. And we'll talk about like continuing this and doing even more deep dives, because what we want to do is every Monday just start going through this with every character that we see it in.
Oh, dude, please.
And just keep going. Who knows? Maybe we'll start a Heroes with 1,000 Face, or the Hero with 1,000 Faces book club. I don't know. We'll do something.
That'd be brilliant. I still have mine in the other room. Man, I got that back in. Let's see, because I remember when 2005 happened. For those that don't remember DVDs, ancient technology, and then VHSs, and Laserdisc. But I remember watching the making of it and him, mentioning Joseph Campbell, and I was getting ready to go freshman at the time, and I was like, well, I'm gonna pick up a class on this little mythology thing, look up this Joseph Campbell character. It's fascinating. Then Lord of the Rings, I went back and rewatched the whole thing, because at first I'll admit I wasn't too much into it, but then rewatching it, I'm like, oh, and then Call to Adventure, everything like that, of Gandalf and all that sort of stuff, giving it the wise mentor. to going all the way back to Star Wars, and then just rewatching from then after the prequels got done, going all the way back to 4, 5, 6, and then rewatching all the way through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's very fascinating to watch that thing, and just like, what is it, as George says, it's like poetry, it rhymes.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool. There's a really amazing picture out there of every single moment of Luke and Anakin, to where was it, he's looking through and sees Aunt Beru and Owen's death, and then Anakin's is, looking out through the twin sunsets of his mother,
Mm-hmm.
and how that echoes across the hero's journey and everything like that. It's just brilliant, man. And how he actually went to got Joseph Campbell to actually go to the premiere of A New Hope before, I think he passed in, oh God, I don't want to get this wrong. It wasn't too long after that, but I just remember he went to his, some of his seminars, and was like, picked up some stuff like, hey, would you mind if I use it? No, go ahead. And it's a really amazing thing to deep dive into stuff when you're just like, fireworks, effects and stuff. Let's go about that. I mean, if that's your cup of tea, go ahead, man. But
Mm-hmm.
I love the deep dive into the characters, psyche, and why they do the things they do, or may not even subconsciously know that they do. It's really, really nifty. So I would love to be a part of that, man. So please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we could even do today, and then we can revisit it in even further depth next week and the following weeks, because when we get to Anakin, that's huge. And you even have Han Solo, huge Kenobi. There's so much, and even an interesting one, which would be a really great parallel, is looking at Palpatine, but really as the antithesis of the hero's journey, and seeing just the very thing of almost the way George wrote him, that intentionally he went, every time there was a temptation, Palpatine really took the descent further and further, and he wanted that, and he embraced it.
He wanted the gold, and he just went towards it and just turned that into unlimited power, and the rest is history. But it's very fascinating. I've only heard that reference one time. I'm glad you brought that up. Because at first I was like, huh? And then a while back, I remember looking at something like that. So that'd be great to visit, man.
Yeah. There, and there's a whole bunch we can postulate and just see if we can dig into it, because it's even this, whether we want to call this a study or discussion or whatever, when we're looking at the hero's journey stuff, you just find, like you said, that there's so much more to Star Wars than Star Wars, like and what's amazing is not only did it change filmmaking, and did it changed the way stories were written and films produced and all this, it changed literally our world, merchandising, everything. But when you get down to it, the story George wanted to tell was like the wholesome mythology for his generation, the wholesome fantasy that he grew up with. And it's incredible that all decades and decades later, we're still trying to figure it out, and I don't think you can ever fully figure it out, but there's so much you can learn from it. So I maybe just the final thing we could talk about, because obviously, essentially, kind of a recap for everything. We have this call to adventure at the very beginning. There's this ordinary world that Luke Skywalker is living in. He has this call to adventure. He refuses the call. We've kind of talked about the lumping in of the supernatural aid, the meeting of the mentor, all of this, and he crosses the threshold in A New Hope, And then there's the descent into the belly of the whale,
Yeah.
and there's the trials and goddess temptation, the abyss, the father, the the death and rebirth, all of this stuff, and the boons and the refusal of returns, all this crazy stuff that's happening. It gets incredible. And then you start to go into the third stage. So we have the first stage really as the separation. It's a separation from the ordinary world to, you can call it the special world, the unknown, the fantastic, the supernatural, what have you. And the second stage, which is kind of the most deep philosophically, is that initiation. It's how does he navigate this world? Because this is where everything can go wrong.
Yeah.
And then we get to really the third stage is the return. And the whole point, and if you're thinking about all of these temptations that are brought to Luke's life, it's all about returning to the ordinary. And it's like, give everything up, go back. Like, it's whether it's go back to the rebel base, get out of the trench run, leave Dagobah, stop your training short, join your father, all of this. It's all about keeping, it's almost like this, it's the dark side of the force. That's the way it's manifested and portrayed. But there's this unseen pull to keep him from becoming a hero, because what's on the other side of the return is eventually Joseph Campbell called it like he has the freedom to live. He becomes a master of both worlds. When he crosses this final threshold, he is a master of the ordinary and the special.
Yes.
And now he's untethered from future and past, and he can choose what he wants to do. And that's where you get into
He walks.
yeah
Ironically.
you get into all sorts of really, really crazy stuff and really cool. And that's why for me, I would love, I know there's books, but I would really, really love like a live action treatment of Luke and the new Jedi Order. Him rebuilding. And I even thought about this with the hero's journey. I'm like, what if, the whole Marvel what if, like, what if there was a Star Wars what if of like Luke, Vader and Luke, like Anakin and Luke rebuilding the Jedi Order, and Anakin and Leia rebuilding like a Republic Senate. If there's like this full redemption of Anakin's hero's journey, I'm like, I would love to see that. Even in a what if that's the way we get it live action. But I'm like,
that would be amazing. I guarantee that would sell like hotcakes.
Yeah. Yeah. So for all of that recap, there's the road back, the crossing of the threshold. You have this whole magical flight that Joseph Campbell describes, and it kind of culminates in the destruction of the Death Star 2 and the redeeming of Anakin. All of this. But for you with this last stage, like what let's maybe do a different approach. Like, what stands out to you the most? Like, what most excites you in Luke's story about that final stage?
Again, besides the story aspect and the mythology aspect of it, credit is where it should be put as well, is and it's their job too, but the actors, it's very amazing watching Mark Hamill when he is, like you said, in A New Hope. I can't do that. I got Tasha Space got some power converters. He goes from that to, I am a Jedi like my father before me, and even winding back to his face, soon I'll be dead, and you along with me. And it gets a very much more darker, but it's fascinating. But for me, just going into the world redeemer of this. Here's this individual, this hero, who's arguably looking at maybe one of the most terrifyingly evil people, but sees something in there, whether it's something of himself or something, a spark, an ember that's still there that nobody else can see, but he can see it. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And everything like that. And I'm part of, again, that goes to the Ewok thing, which where make it short is I love how he imparts the wisdom of Yoda, the Yoda lesson to Han and Leia, and has a C-3PO and everything like that. If you watch Mark Hamill's performance when he's given the thing of when they get the net falls down on them, and then they go like that, and then Han has his blaster ready and everything like. He's like, well, no, wait, and everything like that. Like, of course, something like that. But if you look at Mark Hamill's face reaction, he's like, I've seen this before. I'm going to let this play out. And then it's ironically enough, it's the same thing. The little person, the wise person on the road, if it hadn't been for that, scouts would have been alerted. Never known what could happen. They could have been alerted for the presence, the destiny. Things would have gone bad if Leia, another hero's journey, would not have, little Warwick Davis there at the time, hadn't spent time with that. But whenever you see Luke's facial expression, it's priceless. Of just that of, I have seen this before, I'm gonna let this play out. And then after at the campfire, when 3PO's retelling the story of everything that came before, he's just like, okay, I've done what I need to do. I've imparted whatever lesson I need to do here. I need to go take care of something. And that's the world redeemer. That's the, going to the Father, chosen one at the time. A lot of people didn't know that, but just go and do that. He doesn't care about, to a point, he doesn't really care about the Jedi, or, at the time it wasn't called Sith, but just, dark side. It's very interesting to watch and go back and look at like his facial expression. All he cares about is his dad, even to the point where he gets to, well, this is getting very bad. I don't know how it's ironic enough. Again, I'll make it short, and I'm sorry, man.
No, you're good.
Okay. It's another descent moment. If you don't have the Ewoks, the teddy bears in that movie, it's a very dark film. It could be, because it's ultimately, if you take everything out of it and look at it, there's this teenage kid who's leading up to manhood, who's going to do a kamikaze on this place, or thinks he is, until, of course, the Emperor, having a grand old time, knows about it the whole time. And because up until then, he's just trying to get his dad. That's all he cares about. He just cares about that ember. He cares about what's still there. But, that moment of looking at the darkness, the event horizon, the villain, the dragon, he's just like, well, this may not turn out great, but I'm still going to do it anyways. And that's another reason why I love Luke as a Jedi, as that. And it's one of my favorite versions of him, period, point blank. It's a long story, and of course we can give more into it, but just, I love that aspect of the Redeemer part. It's very cool looking back of how far he went from Tashi space and pick up some power converters to, and then you get to seeing this. Okay, watch this. And it's just facial stuff of, slice, and then you got the realization of, oh wait, it's going back to Empire, the K vision, when he cuts off Vader's hand, and he sees, what's left. The cybernetic hand realizes not only is it his father, you need to stop, this could potentially become you. Was that what the K was warned about, or was that something else? Just a lot of things, just so many things out there, man. I just love. It's another reason I love Star Wars so much. You incorporate stuff like this onto here, and it really makes you think about things and what's right and wrong, or what's, from a point of view, just brilliant. Love talking about stuff like this, man.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I love it. Chat loves it. Great insight, Charlie from Darth Maximus.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, seriously, man. There's so much, and it's making me think of. I think what we're gonna do next week, get X-Wing on, and we'll see, maybe who else as well. But what it makes me think about what we'll do next week is we can really start digging into particular moments and how we see George Lucas masterfully use the hero's journey, not just for a singular linear approach, but he's weaving these connections, and you're seeing
Mhm.
a real struggle. Because I'm thinking about what you talked about with all of them caught up in the net. It's not the great boon that he's giving away, but it's like it is another boon where it's like he's like, no, don't do this.
Yeah.
And he's like, I know where this made me end up. And even the call to Han's hero's journey,
Hmm.
him on the Falcon saying, I don't believe in the hokey ancient religions, all of this,
Yeah.
to then what he's seen and experienced and Luke's experiences. He's like, exactly what you said. Hold up.
Yeah.
I've seen it before. And I also find it so interesting. It's what's very, very fascinating is how George, and you've touched on it, and I've mentioned it, how he didn't just like use this as a cookie cutter way. Okay, here's a story. Here's a way I can monetize it
Yeah.
because it works.
Bad
It's
guy,
like,
good guy, go.
yeah,
Yeah.
he really, really thought about this,
Hmm.
because it's like every now and then I almost think about it like this, like in Return of the Jedi, it's almost like you have the beast of the deep like coming up, and it keeps trying to rear its head and pull him back down, as
Good old
opposed to like
thing.
I've conquered it. It keeps showing up. And like
Mhm.
my favorite scene in all of Star Wars is when Luke is just hammering down on
Yeah.
Vader,
Jedi
and
Fury.
he cuts off his hand, and it's this it's almost like in that moment, it's like just for a second, it's like he returns to the belly of the beast and temptation. Like
Yeah.
it's like just like that. It's so quickly. He didn't have to go through the whole process again. He
No.
just got pulled right back. And then, like you said, again, it's this, I've been here. He chooses
Yeah.
to throw away his lightsaber, and like, oh man, to me, it's like, it's so tastefully done. It's incredible.
Yeah. Again, man, it's just brilliant performances, whether it be, God rest his soul, Dave Prowse, who did the Vader movements and everything like
Mhm.
that, Mark Hamill, Ian McDermott. I mean, without those guys, doing that, and it's just brilliant. Of course, Frank Oz, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's and good old Alec Guinness and Carrie Fisher, so many others, Han Solo, the man, the myth, the legend, Harrison Ford. It's really fun because, yeah, like you just said a minute ago, not just Luke goes through it. Literally everybody goes through it. It's just, again, just like the meme that takes over me. It's like poetry, it rhymes. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a fascinating thing. So I love that aspect when you break stuff down to just, again, if it's your like if it's your cup of tea, go ahead. But that the Michael Bay approach, they're great
Mhm.
movies, but explosions going off and everything like that it's cool. It'll sell seats, but the deeper meaning of it is Star Wars, and the hero with a thousand faces, man, is just brilliant.
Yeah, and I think what we'll end up doing is we'll end up kind of pausing here for
Sure.
next week. But I'm thinking you're so right in that it's so easy to, I suppose, either just become pretentious, in film writing and storytelling, and just be like, we have to be so incredibly deep and moving, and all this. But George, like, he's like, yeah, I want the fun. I want the, like, I want this, like, Saturday morning serials with
Saturday
Flash
matinee.
Gordon.
Yeah.
He's like, but I also want mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what a task to say, I want to write mythology for my generation.
Yeah.
Dude, that's incredible, and what a feat. And that's what I love, and hopefully, you know, we with these streams, and what we'll do, and I'll extend it to you here too. Don't feel obligated by any means, but every Monday we're gonna try and do these
Sure.
for the next while. We'll see how long it goes, but you always have an open invite, you know.
Man, thank
Monday
you.
evenings we'll be doing this. But I just would love to just keep digging into
Right.
the mind of George, the mind of Joseph Campbell, and hopefully, you know, maybe we can figure out a way to tie this a little past Star Wars. Is how does the hero's journey, that mythology, kind of impact our life? You know, because I mean, it is masterful storytelling, but then there also is
Life lessons.
yeah, so much more, because it's George, like you said, George didn't. He didn't do the, well, granted, Michael Bay wasn't doing stuff, but he didn't do the Michael Bay approach.
I didn't want to throw him under the bus, but that was the first thing that popped in my head.
You know, you and I being, you know, close in age, it's you remember when all the Michael Bay stuff was coming out. You know, the first one was like, dude, so cool.
Yeah.
And then the second one's like, okay. Third one, you're like, oh, okay. Then it just kind of became a meme, you know, and it's like, you know, there's nothing wrong with it, but then it was like, it became like a verb, like, oh, you're just gonna Michael Bay, you know, the movie. But I mean, what I love about George is he had elements in there like that, but then there was so much more.
If he did it for a reason.
Yeah.
And there's probably a pretty good Easter egg reason why he did certain stuff. You know, oh, your father wanted you to have this when you're old enough. Well, what's that then? What's that about? And funny how that turns out.
Mm-hmm. That's the truth, man. Cool. Well, Charlie, thank you so much, man, for hopping on. This has been an absolute treat and treasure.
Oh man.
Yeah.
This is an honor for me, man. I was literally in the middle of the training. I got done watching something. I see a like little notification for you guys. I'm like, wait, what? Whoa! And I seen Luke's face, and I was like, oh, is this what he was talking about the other day? Oh my god, I'm a horrible person. Jump in, and it was like, so I didn't know how far it was in. So I was like, yeah, that'd be cool, you know, sometime or another. So even today, I appreciate it, man. I didn't know how long you were going, so I really appreciate you taking your time, man, to do this.
No, the honor is all here. I mean, I know we could say it back and forth, but for you, I know, like when I saw you, I'm like, yep, got right out of training. Like, what a guy, man. You know, but this, like I said at the top, I definitely wanted to extend an invite, just because, yeah, like the hero's journey is something I knew about and had like looked at, but then like the more you and I had kind of been like chatting online and comments and such, I was like, let's do this. Like, let's dive deep into this. I'm like, even if Charlie's the only one who shows up, man, let's do this, because it's so like you have to. And like Darth Maximus said here, you know, like maybe it's a modern day Homer. Yeah, you know,
brilliant.
Dude, right on. And that's part of what Joseph Campbell studied.
Yep.
So it's so cool. But I'm gonna shut it down here. Thanks everybody for being here. If you're watching the replay, thanks so much. Every Monday we're gonna be doing these, and hopefully we'll see how many characters we can get through, and how many movies, books, all sorts of fun stuff.
Sounds good to me.